Hey everyone, welcome back to the Rollout. I'm Linsay Rousseau.
And I'm Genevieve Marie. Hello and welcome. We have got
Yay!
an awesome show for you today because
Yes.
we are talking about Disney Plus's new show, Loki.
And possibly other things, but we have a fantastic guest with us today, Cameron Rice. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Looking
Yeah.
forward to this. Had that moment of like, oh yeah, I gotta watch the new episode. I watched it 3 a.m. last night.
Oh, good. Well, before we dive in, just tell people a little bit about yourself. Like, you got some serious geek cred going on here for people who don't know who he is.
Oh man, trying. So for those who don't recognize me, which is totally fine. I big in the Twitch space, worked over at Geek and Sundry and Hyper RPG, both on their movie discussion show and doing tabletop RPGs, hosted a show there, co-wrote the Power Rangers RPG for Saban. And then after that, went into hosting a television show, El Rey Nation, with Hector Navarro, Kelly Nugent, and Vanessa Guerrero, where we talked about movies, video games, comics, all that kind of stuff. And also do photography and directing. And those things have kind of been taking off lately too, which has been a lot of fun. So I feel like I got different avenues to kind of talk about all these different things, both visually and the geek landscape, hopefully.
Yes. And if you are looking for photography and you are in the LA area, check out Cam's Instagram and hit him up for photo shoots because he's amazing.
Please, thank you so much.
Okay, let's dive in. So Loki, I don't know about you guys, is something I've been looking forward to since they announced we were getting a Loki show because he's probably my favorite part of the MCU, quite frankly. But I don't know. So I guess what are your thoughts? There's only a couple episodes out yet, so we have not seen
just two.
Just the two. So we haven't seen
critics have the third. Critics have the third right now.
They do. And I've heard the third picks up speed a little bit more, but
okay.
With what we've had so far, what do you think?
Well, let me ask this. Where do you guys land on the Thor movies? Because I think everyone loves Loki. The Thor movies, I think, are there. And don't get Ragnarok. I think everyone agrees, much like Loki, the character. I think everyone loves. There's the occasional outlier.
Yeah.
But where generally in the MCU does Thor fall? The character and the films.
I mean, I've always enjoyed them. I liked the original. I mean, I like that they made him a lighter character by the third iteration. And the fact that we're getting Natalie Portman back, because I thought the first movie was fantastic. The second one, I also didn't hate the second one either. Like I thought it was very dark and gritty compared to what we've had with Love and Thunder. What we've had, with the third one.
Since Taika came out.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Genevieve.
Yeah, no, I enjoy the Thor films. The second one, that is what it is. It's not.
I didn't hate it.
That's the thing is I didn't hate it. It wasn't an absolute dumpster fire in my eyes. There was some
smoke coming out of the
it wasn't an absolute total dumpster fire. It has its moments, but like it never really caught traction, and that's kind of where I had the issues with it. Right. Thor the character, I think, is probably the character that the MCU, like, over the course of like the Thor movies, the Avengers, all of that, I think he's the character that has gone through the most changes and who has gone through the most impressive growth, like both as far as like finding where that character exists in this world. Because really, I mean, they say that Guardians of the Galaxy was the first movie to like kind of like offshoot into like the weird, like introducing, the, space and the wider, galaxy in the world. It's actually Thor that does that with Asgard, although they don't really expand and like jump into other universes. I mean, they tried to do that a little bit with the second one, very clunkily, of course, falling ass over tea kettle trying to do it. But and like Guardians, they were able to do it extremely well. But I feel like Thor was the character that needed to kind of build, become a fully fleshed out character. At first you get this kind of very two-dimensional, like, I am a hero character,
well, they made him human over he went from being super serious god to he's a human being now.
Right. And I think Thor, out of all of the main Avengers cast, probably had to go through the most changes, and make the most difficult choices, because a lot of his life and his the choices that he has to make is directly tied to his people, and even more closely, his literal family. So I think the stakes for him are extremely high, and that's what makes him an interesting character. And that's what made him, a really, really great character by the end of, the whole like first Avengers arc.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I enjoyed them.
Yeah.
I'm the outlier there. I did not like the first two Thor movies. I think the first one, and not even like I think Dark World's pretty bad, but the first Thor I actually found boring. Love the cast, and I like Kenneth Branagh as a director, but I'm also now slightly of the opinion that unless it's Shakespeare, Kenneth Branagh doesn't really know what to do with the material.
Well, and I think that's why it was so heavy. I mean, it was, yeah.
But I think the big, like for me, I'm a big character guy. Anything else in a movie I can forgive. A bad plot, dialogue, but if you make the characters work, I can go with it. And such a big part of that first Thor movie is the relationship between, and I think that's why Loki took off more than anything else in that movie, is he's the most fascinating, interesting character, more so than the main character of Thor. And even Jane Foster, because it's one of those like difficult things where there's lines of dialogue at the end of that movie with Rene Russo, because they make it very clear in that movie that the Asgardians are thousands of years old. They've been around so long. And then Natalie Portman and Chris Hemsworth known each other for 4 days. And most of that time he's either in a hospital, in a prison cell, or drinking with Selvig. And then at the end, Rene Russo was like, he's thinking about his great love. And I'm like, I don't buy this as a love story at all. A hardcore attraction, 100%. But
that was my big critique with Wonder Woman. And I was like, she's known Chris Pine's character for like a solid week, and now her entire life is like centered. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But at least like there was a singular journey, and that like their thing was more about a mission as opposed to like, let's get to know each other. Whereas like Thor was about, let's get to know each other. And I'm just like, well, you're not really knowing each other. He's in a prison cell with Hawkeye right now. I don't know where you are. And then he drew doodles in her book, and I guess that's when they fell in love. And I'm like, I don't buy it, which is why then like Thor the Dark World is so much about like, I need to save Jane. And I'm like, I don't feel like I really know either of you that well for this to be the crux of the second film for me to invest. I love the way that movie actually visually looks. There's a lot of criticisms about some of the Marvel films, how they visually kind of have like a similar color grading palette and stuff like that. And I think that one actually does have like a look and a cinematography to it. And we'll talk about that with the show. To be fair,
Natalie Portman walked away from the series.
Well, I think that's the biggest
because of some of the things you just brought up.
That there's that. And I think also, problematic as he is, but just to invoke his name real quickly, Joss Whedon, when he talked about writing those two Avengers movies, talked fairly openly about that Thor is the hardest character to write for. He's like, because where does he fit in the team? You have the leader in Cap, you have the strength in Hulk, you have the arrogance in Tony. And I think you feel that in those two Avengers movies, even though Loki's the main villain of the first Avengers movie. If you didn't see Thor and they didn't say the dialogue, these two are brothers, you wouldn't really click into that. And so Hemsworth, I remember reading until Taika came on, he basically was like, I don't want to do these anymore. Like, there's nothing for me to do. I'm too serious, this, that, and the other. And I think like he went to edit. I feel like Marvel even kind of admitted like, this isn't working. This is the one series we have that's not clicking 2 films in. Like, people love Loki, people love this part, but as a whole, these 2 films are just not clicking. And I feel like that's when they went to Taika and basically said, whatever you want to do. we got to keep Chris on.
Well, and at that point, they saw the success of Guardians of the Galaxy and the fact that, people will watch a comedy MCU film.
People will watch a comedy MCU film with a very distinct director's take. And also at that point too, during Ragnarok is also when they started doing pre-production on Infinity War. And like, I guess the Russos had to be told like, hey, the Thor from Age of Ultron is not the Thor anymore. We're in a different direction here. So you need to change some of these ideas that you have. And so Ragnarok, I love. Ragnarok's one of my favorite ones. I'm so excited for Love and Thunder.
Can we get a prequel Hela series or movie? Because Kate Blanchett as Hela was just like,
so drag delicious.
Oh my gosh.
Like
so amazing.
Perfect. That said, going into Loki, was very excited, but also very interested because this is obviously a Loki coming out of the first Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm like, ooh, there's like 8 years of character growth that now Tom Hiddleston has to kind of go back on.
Bridge. That didn't happen.
And so I'm like, that's going to be fascinating.
Yet.
No. And so I'm like, that's fascinating. But it could also end up feeling like we're regressing in the story. And 2 episodes in, it doesn't feel that way.
No.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a character regression or reset. It still feels like, okay, and I think that's Hiddleston as an actor and the writing of the show so far.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your credit, like Tom Hiddleston is obviously a brilliant, like I don't think there's not many actors that probably could pull off the nuance of this character. And obviously Tom is a classically trained Shakespearean actor. He's got decades of experience. So being able to bring those levels to Loki and like you said, have to like regress for this show. I mean, that is a tall ask of a performer. And, you know, he's just, well, and that's why he's been the breakout character of the MCU. I mean, people have just latched onto him.
Yeah, he was like, it doesn't really exist anymore. It still exists, but not really. But like, he was like the first big MCU Tumblr boy. Like Tumblr fell in love with that character.
Right.
So much fan art.
Well, and I don't think he was even supposed to have, I don't think his character was supposed to go beyond the first. He definitely wasn't supposed to be in the Avengers, but people saw how popular he was.
He was. The difference is that the Avengers was supposed to be originally a team up of Loki and Red Skull. Oh,
right.
And I think they kind of saw how much people grabbed onto Loki. And I really love the first Captain America movie, but nobody was doing Tumblr art of Red Skull.
Well,
like,
and
just,
to be
it wasn't
fair,
happening.
I wonder why.
And then Christopher Eccleston walked away from Red Skull, and we had
no, Chris Eccleston was in Dark World. He was the Dark Elf.
Oh, no.
Hugo
Red
Weaving.
Skull was
Hugo.
Thank you, Hugo Weaving, not Chris Eccleston. Yeah, Hugo Weaving walked away from the character. Yeah.
Because there was but we didn't know that at that point. Like, because I remember even going into Winter Soldier, there was rumors about like, was Robert Redford secretly the Red Skull? Was there going to be a Hugo Weaving reveal at the end of Winter Soldier? And obviously none of that came to pass. Like, it wasn't until I think like
who's under these bandages.
Exactly. Right? It wasn't until like I think after Winter Soldier that then the Hugo Weaving news came out of like, oh no, he's done. He doesn't want to do him anymore.
Yeah, which is too bad because he's obviously an amazing actor, and quite frankly, like. I would have loved to see Hugo Weaving and Tom Hiddleston perform together. Like, I just think that would have been
that would have been so camp right? In the best way.
And then you know what? Yeah, it could have been great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm loving the show so far. I'm really digging it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we're only a couple episodes in, but and it was rumored we'd be getting Lady Loki, but like, thank you, Marvel. Thank you. I am so happy we now have Lady Loki, even though there's speculation she might not actually be Loki. I have seen, Reddit's kind of blown up saying she's actually Enchantress. She's not really Loki, but she had the horns. So for now, she's Lady Loki.
So let's riff on that for a minute, because Enchantress is created by Loki. So maybe in a timeline, like, in the technology that they're using at the TVA, that she registers as being a Loki, or at least a part of Loki. So like there is no differentiation. There is no differentiation between her and Loki if she is Enchantress. Like, do we think that she is the like gender fluid Loki, or do we think that she is Enchantress? And I kind of am tending to lean towards Enchantress.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way too, only because I feel like it seems like such an obvious thing, but I do feel like if it was straight out Loki, they would have dyed her hair black.
Yeah. Well, that, like, visually, yes. Also, I feel like there are probably more places to go with a character like Enchantress, because then she would not only have reason to, target the TVA, but she would also have reason to target specifically Loki and to screw him over as far as having character motivation and, screw him over in his timeline so that everybody's, the TVA is chasing all the Lokis and stuff, and she can like break the timeline essentially and escape into it.
Well, it's potentially giving us a new villain for Phase 4. I mean, obviously, we're totally speculating here, guys. Like, we know nothing what Kevin Feige has planned, but like, I'm okay to have a new female villain in phase 4. Like, that is exciting to me.
Yeah, all we know at the moment is we do know from what Kevin Feige has said in interviews that like Loki is going to be like the show that kind of really pushes what phase 4 is going to be.
Right.
We do know that Wanda is in Multiverse of Madness. Obviously, the movie is called Multiverse of Madness, and the show is all about
setting up here.
Yeah, and the show's all about like, we can't have multiverses; they can't be a thing, and so it makes you kind of go.
Well, Loki just fractured the timeline, so that, and people are saying this is the catalyst for Multiverse of Madness. Is like, oh shit, Loki, Enchantress, whatever, just fractured the timeline. There you go. Yeah,
so I'm very excited to see where this all leads from here, because we also know that they're filming a lot of these movies currently. This might also be due to COVID, I don't know, but in London, because even Paul Rudd was like, oh yeah, we're in London right now. So their usual Atlanta spot, because Doctor Strange's 2 has been filming in London, Paul Rudd's filming Quantumania in London right now. And so it's like, okay, that's very interesting that you're not doing the normal Atlanta thing that all the Marvel movies have done.
Pinewood pulled out of Atlanta.
Oh, you're right.
That was a political decision. Pinewood pulled out of Atlanta when it was either the trans bill or it was the voting suppression. They're like,
that's right.
We're out. So,
yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So needs must. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. And so the show on a technical level, the things I really do enjoy about it is, it should have been obvious considering how WandaVision and Winter Soldier turned out. But I remember when like the first trailer started coming out and it was like, we saw the DB Cooper scene and little flashes like that. And I think a lot of people thought this was going to be like Doctor Who, but with Loki.
Yeah.
Where he would just kind of do adventures every week. And obviously and that could have been really fun, but I do appreciate that that's not the case, that there is like a solid storyline going through.
I very much appreciate that was not what it turned out to be.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, but I'm like, if the timekeepers end up being the Time Lords, and then it's this whole like, yeah.
And I love how like I talked about earlier about how some of the Marvel movies look visually, how they all kind of have a sameness to it. I will say, like, these 3 shows, I love how they look.
Oh, yeah.
The cinematography, it feels like it's like, oh, whether Marvel heard it or these directors, because I think so far all 3 series have been like a singular director has done all of the episodes. And so I don't know if these are directors who have heard that and they're like, well, not mine. Mine's not going to look the same. Because like there's some really gorgeous cinematography in Loki that I'm like, I have not seen this in the films.
They have each show, as far as I've seen, has a very unique voice and a very unique look. And I specifically, all right, so this is the thing that that personally, I will admit I do feel bitter. I didn't want to say that I feel bitter about it, but I freaking do, because I know that everybody's going to look at these amazing sets and this great use of brutalist architecture and like bringing it up to that new weird status and being like, oh my God, Loki was the first to do it. And I looked at the sets and I looked at the style and even right down to the lighting. It's Control. I'm sorry. It's the game Control. It is the oldest house from Control. Play the game. Tell me I'm wrong. It is Remedy's Control. And I love, and I'm not going to say that nobody can do this style, that nobody can, take inspiration from it, because I love movies and films. And like if films and movies and all sorts of media didn't take inspiration from it, we wouldn't have Star Wars. We wouldn't have Avatar: The Last Airbender. However, I look at it and I think to myself, we're going to get a lot of people that are going to just go off on this like really cool and original use of brutalist architecture in the new weird style and point to Loki as being like the nascence, the genesis of that. And it's like, that's not... Obviously, they were heavily influenced by Control, which also
I wonder though. I
like the TVA.
I do wonder about that only because Control came out in August and they started filming in January. That's a quick turnaround time for them to be heavily influenced. I could say like I could definitely see something, but like for like that's not a lot of time. I feel like I kind of wonder if that's something like there's something in the air creatively, like when
do that too, yeah.
There's that degree of, and I'm not saying that there wasn't some influence, but I think like, yeah, because if they're shooting in January, Control comes out in August, they only have 3 months before filming. I mean, you can build the sets, but you have to go through a lot of approval.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I don't know. I'm just looking at it like right down to the 70s like style brutalist architecture, to the 70s style like workplace, like posters that they have put up. Like Miss Minutes looks a lot like, look at my Twitter. It looks scarily a lot like an exact same like style of a clock poster that they have in Control.
Well, I mean, to be fair, that's also taking us back to like Fallout and BioShock. I mean,
Miss Minutes to me is straight up Jurassic Park. That's Mr. DNA. Yeah, down to the Southern accent and the video that explains the exposition. I'm like, this is clearly Mr. DNA.
Yeah, somebody pointed out to me too that they're like, oh, it's Mr. DNA, and I'm like, yeah, that is true. But going back to like the visuals with Thor and with Ragnarok and the Guardians of the Galaxy, it is a pretty sharp departure from that specific look, because that's like a lot of colors, a lot of saturation, and it's more focused on the lighting, and like, you know, it's more reserved. So what do you guys think about that, as far as like they drop these huge bombshells about Infinity Stones mean nothing, spoiler alert, but also we're pulling back on like the visual style to maybe focus on the story a little bit more?
I kind of love that, because I think, you know, if anybody's ever gotten those like art of the books that they come out with around every Marvel movie, if you look at the art of the Guardians of the Galaxy or the art of Thor Ragnarok specifically, they're so much more colorful. And I think, and there's been great videos out there on YouTube about like Marvel's color correcting and what they tend to do in their movies, but also the fact that they shoot on the Alexa, whereas Guardians 2 was shot on the red. And I think that's why Guardians 2 is as vibrant and colorful and does what it does, whereas a lot of the other Marvel movies kind of have like a palette, like it's almost like, oh, we put all these bright colors and now let's put a gray over it. So it kind of dulls it down just a little bit. And I love that these three shows have not felt that way. It doesn't feel like my favorite, which is not a lot of people's favorite episode, but visually my favorite episode of Winter Soldier was the Mandapore episode when they go to the club.
Right.
Visually, I'm like, oh, I could see exactly how this would look in one of the movies. And it would be, you could tell there's purple, you could tell there's these things, but also like a gray filter over it to ground it. And I feel like for whatever reason on these three TV shows, I don't know if like Endgame just made them so like, whatever, just make it look cool. And like, I think that's the thing, is like these three shows. And so to me, like bringing down that color, but I love the kind of like orange, it's not necessarily like neon. It's not neon lighting, but it's almost like it's
a very warm, like tungsten.
It's the
tungsten look,
the dimmed fluorescent, again 1970s. These were the fluorescent lights that were in offices sort of look, you know.
Whereas like they put those filters over the top, like so it looks like skylights, but there is like literally like it's the fluorescent lighting that's shining down through the architecture of the ceilings. It's really cool. And then there's a lot, the palette is actually surprisingly very warm for the architecture style that they chose to use, because that architecture style is very cold and it is very like, it's very clinical, but with the lighting that they use, like, you know, it's very much like the sunset in the background of my, you know.
Well, and honestly, it reminded me a little bit of Umbrella Academy. I mean, whatever they're called in that, not the Time Lords of the Time Keepers, but similar, that kind of, you know, retro-y, except that they use the practical, like everybody's smoking. So we've got the cigarette haze to help add that.
That's the only thing that's missing from the show. A lot of these characters need to have more sitting at desk.
Well, it's Disney Plus, so we're not going to get the cigarettes, but
they did have the booze though. I did notice that. I'm like, they are doing it is very Mad Men. They are doing the Mad Men thing with the booze, and they just don't have the cigarettes. Also on top of that, like making it into this very tight corporate structure, I think is very interesting, because it also speaks to our world as well, and grounds it a little bit more into our understanding, especially when they're coming at you with these larger concepts of like of the timeline and how like, you know, fractures work and the pruning and stuff. So you can feel a little bit more grounded in the world that they're showing you as far as like the whole, like the business, the corporate side of things. But then it also is introducing these huge ideas in which you can get a little bit more breathing room on your brain. Like if it looked like the Guardians of the Galaxy or Thor Ragnarok with all the little bits and pieces and bobs and like greebles that they added to the set, then it's going to be very confusing for you, like visually, as well as trying to grasp what is actually happening in the narrative.
Right.
Because as Cam, as you said, they are using Loki to lay the groundwork of the next phase. So if people don't understand what's going on, then the next phase is basically like, like the rug ripped out.
And I think that's why I kind of like that this has sort of said the Infinity Stones in like a storytelling way, just kind of went like, we're done with it. We did it.
We use them as paperweights.
We use them as paperweights because it's a great way to tell your audience, because there could always be people in the audience who are like, well, what if someone finds another one and and they come back because there's time travel. We've introduced time travel now, and it's a great way to tell your audience, like, don't worry about that anymore. We're done. It's done.
Yeah. I loved that. Steve, my fiance, actually, he made a comment. Like, I think that a lot of people are going to feel this way about like, oh, so now Infinity Stones mean nothing. And like, that we have something that is far more powerful than that. And to me, I feel like, and the corporate setting is perfect for this, because for me, I feel like the TVA, like, even though, and I have my own thoughts about, you know, who is running the TVA and, you know, how
we gotta talk about this. Yes.
All goes about. My imagination is that it is very much like a Psycho-Pass thing where you've got like brains in jars making all the decisions, and it's this very like
Krang came out.
Krang,
where it's like this very like Cthulhian, like sort of crazy, like out there sort of thing.
Love that
people just don't understand. But I was saying that if it is in that corporate structure where there is so much, like, I would say oppression as far as like the people working in the TVA, they're not allowed to go outside of the TVA. They're not allowed to have any fun. Poor Owen Wilson will never be allowed to ride on a jet ski.
That's got to be his ending, right? The ending of the show is him on a jet ski, right? It has to be.
I pray. I hope so. That like that right? They introduced it, so
it's
they
need Chekhov's jet ski.
Yes, they introduced it. They need to make it happen. Gun over the fireplace. It needs to be shot at the end. But for me, I feel like you can have as much power as you want to give the TVA, because inside that corporate structure, everybody is essentially a slave to a higher voice, a higher being, like something that they don't understand, that they've never met them, you know, they've never met the board that runs the TVA, like even the highest person, I forgot, Revna, what's her name, who acts as the judge and Owen Wilson's boss.
Oh, yeah.
Even she seems to not have ever seen or met them. She just keeps saying like, oh, they're busy, they're working, like, like they can't come down. And it's like, I doubt she's even ever seen them. So
well, did you guys see Miracle Workers?
Everybody. What?
Yeah. Did you guys see Miracle Workers? It was there's 2 seasons with Daniel Radcliffe and Steve Buscemi, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like they work in heaven. They're all like corporate employees in heaven, and Steve Buscemi's God, and you don't actually really see him, and they're all stuck there and can't ever do anything else, and they're stuck in there, you know.
So you can give these people all the power that you want. They can operate above everybody else in the universe, but essentially they're corporate slaves. So even having all the power, they have no power because they can't use it. You know what I mean? Like they can't, there is nothing other than the structure of doing what they're told to do. So I'm like, I am okay with the Infinity Stones meaning nothing, because now we have another issue, which is this very oppressive timeline that is being, you know, kept under wraps by the lizard people.
Well, you also have to, you always basically have to go to the next thing too, because it's so funny to go back if you ever do like a Marvel rewatch to see like the first Iron Man and he struggles with the bus. So you kind of have to start, you gotta keep building out. And eventually it gets to the point where it's like, well, how much can you build out after Infinity Stones? And that's where you do go, well, multiverses. And that's the interesting thing is going to be like whatever phase 5 or 6 is like, how, because there's eventually got to come a point where they do bring it back down to have more of your Iron Man 3s. And I love Iron Man 3. I'm in the category that loves Iron Man 3, but those more like personal stories that's really about, we got to get from point A to point B.
Oh yeah, your Winter Soldiers,
So there eventually is going to have to be the thing that does like shrink it back down again. But I think, the next phase is obviously going to be this like multiverse-y, like Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, they're all doing the interviews where they're like, nope, I haven't heard from Marvel. And I'm like, you are lying.
Liars. Well, and it's funny in that way because Sony has Into the Spider-Verse, which worked extremely well. So you can have this like multiverse story that is also, I mean, it's a cartoon that felt very contained to me, and it was executed so masterfully that like I'm not worried necessarily about them like kind of going off and ruining like the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe thing with
I mean the fact that like look Mobius is going to be whatever it's going to be good, but it will be and as much as they want to do interviews where they're like, yeah, we're also part of the MCU, I'm like, I don't know about that, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty certain they'll be able to contain it because they had right before they ended the last phase that we're out of. I don't even know what phase we're in, but
we're like 3.5 right now. I feel like
but you had your Ant-Mans and which were small and contained, for the most part. They introduced larger ideas that came into play, obviously.
The quantum zone and all that.
But it helps that it takes place in San Francisco. That's why I'm a big proponent of like, get these West Coast Avengers. Give me West Coast Avengers.
Yes, we need West Coast Avengers. Unfortunately, with the whole Hawkeye thing being like, I kind of thought that that's where they were probably, if Hawkeye hadn't crashed and burned and was put,
shelved.
Shelved.
There's been photos they've been filming.
They have not been able to finish filming.
Oh, COVID
or various reasons. Yeah, various reasons, which you can Google. We don't need to talk about them here, but some of the performers have been having some issues.
But that seemed to be because, I mean, Kate Bishop, I was so excited to see her. And she basically, in the earlier, she basically is, a West Coast Avenger. She becomes a West Coast Avenger because she moves, to Los Angeles, and it's awesome and it's great. Yeah. So that's where I thought the West Coast Avengers were going to be like coming in. You no longer have Tony Stark. He's dead. So
it feels like they're setting up young Avengers for sure.
Oh, God, with Wanda's kids and Wanda's
kids, other Hawkeye stuff like that. Like it feels like it's all getting set up. But according to Sci-Fi Wire, filming on Hawkeye wrapped in May. The beginning.
Did it? Okay, cool. So maybe we'll.
Maybe
we'll see it.
We will see.
I don't know. Personally, I'm just like waiting on She-Hulk. That's that, and if we're talking TV shows, I'm waiting on She-Hulk, and then if we're talking movies, I'm waiting on the Marvels, because.
She-Hulk, and Moon Knight. I'm very excited about.
Oh, Moon Knight for sure. And Shang-Chi too. Like Shang-Chi already, like the early footage from that looks
looks really good.
But Moon. What is so funny because you're seeing the Instagram photos of him training, and he's like, I can't confirm that I'm Moon Knight. It's like
they never can. Like
I know.
Oh my God, the actress's name.
Because it was Tatiana Maslany. It was like everyone was like the internet
for like
was
2 years.
You're shooting. She's like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Oh, yes, I am. But the NDAs are so strict. Yeah.
Well, I wonder with that one too, how much they were saving that one, hoping for Comic-Con reveal. Because when the time they started filming and they finally were like, yeah, it's her, it was like August or July. I'm like, they wanted to bring her out on a stage. They wanted to do the whole thing.
And Comic-Con would have been perfect because she had such a massive Orphan Black following that was always at every convention. So that would have been huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Because what shows do we have? We have it's She-Hulk. We know She-Hulk, Moon Knight,
Miss Marvel,
Hawkeye, Miss Marvel.
Oh yeah, Miss Marvel.
The one I'm actually most that has like me going like only because so many people thought, well, this has to be Phase 4, but now it's going to be a show, is Secret Invasion.
Oh, and well, then they also just teased for getting
Secret Invasion.
Yeah, and we're getting the Dora Milaje. We're getting the Dora Milaje spinoff. That was just announced.
Yes, right after Winter Soldier was wrapping up.
After Winter Soldier. So that, and they're saying that's going to take place in Wakanda, and I was like, well, that's amazing.
Yeah, the Secret Invasion one has me very interested because like, so many people thought like that's your Phase 4. Phase 4 is Secret Invasion. You litter throughout the movies. Oh my God, that's a scroll. That's a scroll. That's a scroll. So now that they're doing it as a TV show, is fascinating, and I'm just like, ooh, what's that gonna mean? Like, how is that gonna work out?
Well, I feel like Marvel, and obviously we'll see as these shows are coming out, but I feel like Marvel is using the TV the luxury of extended storytelling in the TV shows to lay the groundwork with all these super complicated concepts. So when they get to the feature films, they don't have to waste 45 minutes explaining everything to then jump into the action. It's like, okay, we already know exposition's already been laid out in WandaVision, in Loki, whatever, and now we're getting our feature films.
Well, you also avoid the dreaded exposition character too. Like, it's not going to be like an Inception where you have, your main character is exposition character,
right?
Like.
Well, I think the thing is, and this has been something, and I love the Marvel movies, but I think this is something I've been mildly critical of in the films, and I think the shows are doing a great job of like cleaning that up, as it were. Is if you look at even like WandaVision, like as characters, Marvel really did like the thing about they really didn't do exposition. It really was just like they're met. The next movie, they're dating now, and you're kind of sitting there going like, wait, like unless you know the comics, you got to be sitting there going like, what?
How did this happen?
And like Winter Soldier too, I love that character, but it really went from like, oh my God, Bucky's the Winter Soldier, and for 3/4 of that movie, he's it's not we know it's him, but it's like it's not revealed it's him till halfway through the movie, and then like it's not till the very end that it's like he starts having his things, and he's like, oh, I now slightly remember, and then we never see him again until Civil War, where he's like, I've been dealing with this for 2 years, and you kind of go,
you're like, what?
Would have liked to have seen some of that. So what I love is that the shows are able to do is like take the stuff that Marvel just kind of in the movies goes like, yeah. This happened. They're married. Don't worry about it.
Right.
And so that's sort of the thing. Cause like the one that always stood out to me was in Civil War, at the very end of Civil War, which is the trailer moment. And so many people use it as a GIF. And I know people love this moment, is the Tony Stark to Steve Rogers, where when Steve says to him, like, he's my friend, and Tony Stark goes, well, so was I. And I'm like, ooh, I wish I saw that you were in the movies, because every time you tour on screen, you bicker and you seem to hate each other's guts.
Right. Well, and I think it's, part of it's been like, I feel like the movies have felt like they've had to be beholden. And again, I still love the storytelling in the movies, but I feel like they've had to be beholden to the action. Like everything is centered around the action because that's what's pulling in the big audiences. They want to see these amazing fight sequences. So you don't have the luxury of character development to the extent that you can in, because now you've got a 6-episode TV show. That's 6+ hours of storytelling as opposed to 2.5.
2.5, where it's like, look, we got to get to the end here. They're not friends anymore, but we got to have the stuff in the beginning, and the villain has to have his backstory. And so having these TV shows, you're able to actually like sit and stuff. So that's the thing, is like WandaVision was like, Wanda, you could love those actors. Wanda and Vision were no one's favorite characters going into that show.
I feel like Scarlet Witch Elizabeth Olsen, I was very skeptical because quite frankly, I wasn't impressed with her performance in the movies. And part of that could have come down to the writing. They didn't give her a lot to do with. And so I was very pleasantly surprised with that. But she was the least interesting character of all of the Avengers, I feel like.
And then after 6 episodes, people are so stoked to see her in Multiverse of Madness.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, also to what Linsay was saying, you have these big blockbuster movies, and if you don't have action and fighting and like a final confrontation fight scene, then it feels like the audience feels like they've been cheated,
Yeah.
Right.
Which I think is why Guardians 2 is one of my favorite ones, because that's such a hangout movie.
Oh, it is.
Guardians 2 is like, a friend of mine said greatly, he's like, it's like, what if Richard Linklater made a Marvel movie? Or it's like, there is the big action scene at the end, but for the most part, it is people just kind of hanging out and being like, my dad, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like with the TV show, I feel like, there really was not a lot of action in WandaVision. Like you had your last couple of episodes where, they did the fighty sort of thing. I mean, Falcon and the Winter Soldier was different, but like
Yeah.
their whole MO was different, you know. They're they're an elite team going out and doing, missions and stuff. But like with WandaVision and now with Loki, you can have like there's less expectation in a TV show to have that like third act extreme like battle sequence. Like you can actually like sit down and do have the talkie like let's just hang out sort of thing. And you can have better character development, more character development, and better conversations and more world building, storytelling. Like it you can like pump the brakes a little bit and kind of hang out.
Right.
Well, and I feel like Loki is the perfect example of that because it's literally a conversation between Mobius and Loki. Like the whole show basically comes down to like the majority of the show is just the two of them talking. Like, WandaVision had it, it's like, okay, each episode's a different theme. And okay, so it was, that was more about the style. Whereas this, it's literally just two guys having a conversation.
It's all substance.
Yeah.
It really is. I love
and their chemistry. Their chemistry is just spot on.
Owen Wilson bringing his own Wilson energy was that's the best casting on the show.
He's like, and I'm like, at first it bothered me. I was like, he's literally whispering every line. Cause at first I was like, can he full voice? But now I'm kind of like, no, it kind of works.
He's basically playing his character from Bottle Rockets, and I love it. And I'm Digman.
I loved the Owen Wilson casting choice from the minute that I knew it was happening. I was like, oh, this is going to be great because all I had was visions of like, Thor Ragnarok and how that was so great. And like, I was just thinking, I'm like, what if you got Mobius and what's his name? Not the Collector, but Grandmaster in a room.
Yes. That would be a very interesting conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Jeff Goldblum and Owen Wilson, they're very passive.
What energies that would be.
Right?
Right. And like the TVA has its own melt stick. So,
that's true.
Its own version of the melt stick. So, I was so excited for that. I think that like he definitely is my favorite character in the show. Like, I mean, besides obviously Loki does Loki's thing, and I think maybe I'm leaning too heavily on the fact that Tom Hiddleston is so like such a great performer that I don't even have to worry about Tom Hiddleston doing a great job. But Mobius is also an excellent addition to the cast, and you're just like, wow, like you're both like they're both operating at such a high level that it's such a pleasure to watch that and like not have like a shooty action scene every 5 seconds to like that would just be so annoying, don't you think?
Well, I think that's the thing is like no one's favorite episode of WandaVision is the last one where it's all actiony.
Not at all.
No.
There was a critic, and I can't remember who it was. I wish I could give credit, but there was a great critic who actually like said he's like Marvel has somehow flipped the action movie formula in that most action movies you don't give a shit what people are saying. The characters, you're like, I don't know, whatever. It's the actor. You just want to get to the cool action scenes. And they said Marvel has flipped it that you don't care about the action scenes. You're just like, just let the cool characters talk. I don't like.
Well, and this is okay. We actually just had we talked about this in our episode about the Princess Bride and why it should never be rebooted, and that this goes back to screenwriting and storytelling 101.
Yeah,
plots are great, but people stay because of characters. They want to see rich, well-rounded, multi-layered characters. And I think people were finally getting that. And it's like, yes, big flash. Right. The other thing is like technology has gotten to a point where it's like, it's no longer shocking us. The big action CGI scenes, I feel like we're just like, okay, yeah, that's commonplace. We just saw this in The Last Star. Now it's like, okay, this is not a new big flashy thing. And we're seeing this in The Mandalorian too. I mean, obviously with all the tech that's in that show, it's coming down to the characters and the relationships. And I
kind of wonder if it is the CGI, because I mean, the action stuff that people like today, there's very little or minimal CGI that as the action, like you have your big things like the Raid and stuff like that. But I even think of something like big expensive movies like Fast Five. And what people love about Fast Five, because Justin Lin made enough money on Fast Four that he was like, I want almost no CGI. And like that massive car chase at the end with that bank vault on the streets, those are real streets, real cars. That's a big, massive thing that's smashing into concrete. And people still 10 something years later after Fast Five are still like, that scene rules. And I don't think Marvel has had, as much as I love those movies, I don't know if they've had the elevator scene. That's the most lacking CG in Winter Soldier is the elevator punching scene. And I'm like, and some of them, look, Guardians of the Galaxy, you have to have CG. You just have to. You do.
Yeah.
But some of these, I would love to see like an action director get in there and be like, nope, we're going to do this as practically as we can. We're going to
I feel like that's what they did. And I feel like that's what they did in the Netflix Marvel shows. And I think that's why people love those so much and why there's been such a demand to get those characters back in the MCU. Because it's like, what's the action sequence people still talk about? That
Daredevil
hallway
hallway
fight with Daredevil, 100%.
Yeah.
And, Jessica Jones, Punisher, it was all so, we won't talk about the fourth one. It was all so grounded that everyone just like loved it. Cause it was like no big flash. Like, I believe these people are acting, a lot of it's camera tricks, but it's like, I believe these people are actually doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit of the thing is like, I'm very excited for Shang-Chi, but even like that bus fight sequence, it's like, wow, that's physically impressive, but also
maybe some wire work, but it's a stunt, he's fighting.
But I'm also looking and I'm like, fake bus, San Francisco, not obvious. And obviously they're not going to be in but there is a part of me, I'm kind of like, well, Captain Marvel, they were on a real train. So it's kind of one of these things where you do.
A lot of this comes down to production expenses. And like with technology being the way it is now, it's not so much the CGI, it's the fact that you can now create virtual sets, which means you don't have to go location shoot, which is why you're able to save money there to put it elsewhere. Like The Mandalorian was the perfect example. It's like, that was all a virtual set. And it's like, okay, that's our new CGI, our new technology. And it's not distracting from the film. It's just making it so like, we don't have time to go to 7 different locations. We can literally just change the background on this LED.
Well, and my hope is that the Marvel shows well, not right now, because actually the shows have been great on sets, but like they've been doing actual sets. But what makes the Mandalorian work is that LCD system that they're using creates what natural light would on these costumes. And that's why it looks as good as it is. Cause it's like, the LCD is natural. It's the whole technology thing that's crazy and all very mathematical. But the basic version is that it bounces light correctly. And so that's why things look as good as they do, as opposed to standing on green and then someone has to come in and try and make fake light in a computer.
Or you're fixing it when the colorist is having to fix it, or you're adding virtual, when you're editing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there is a part of me that I'm hoping more, and it looks very expensive, but I am hoping more shows, if they want to be cost prohibitive and be like, look, we can't go to Abu Dhabi to shoot this thing. But like, I hope there is more of like that sort of sets. That's the sound or whatever they call it. That's in Burbank.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because that's the only thing about the Marvel stuff is like, and again, I love it. And I love that these 3 shows feel very practical on very real sets and stuff like that. But if they do have the big, like, oh, here we go, here's the big CG-a-thon, I do kind of hope, like, I'm like, oh, get on the thing so that just the lighting looks right on people's faces.
Right.
Because that's really what it ends up coming down to. It's more about like, how is the light bouncing off of human skin? Because we know what that looks like.
Yeah.
And so the minute things don't look right, you're like,
Well, I feel like Multiverse of Madness is going to be the test of that, because like there's no way to do that film without a shit ton of CGI. Like,
I can't wait.
So we'll see, because if they can nail that, then
I'm also a big Sam Raimi head, and so I'm so excited. I'm like, oh, like, because that dude has not made a movie in 10 years, and that's where I'm like, come back, Sam Raimi.
And let's see what you got. Yeah.
It's interesting. I also kind of wonder if we are not going to also get tired of the virtual sets like we did with the CGI at some point. And then we're going to have this like return to like location shooting, and you know what I mean? Like, where
I don't think so. I mean,
only because it looks so good. So many people,
and it saves so much money.
It saves so much money. It looks so good. And when you show people, oh, this was a virtual thing, most people's responses are like, whoa, like I think a lot of people think that first episode of Mandalorian was shot in like a desert in, Arizona.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that it looks so good. There's not really much on that show that like I could point out where I'm just like, the this, that, and the other. Like it really does all look. And the fact that also that Baby Yoda puppet's practical. If that was a CG puppet, I think that's where we'd be like, something doesn't feel right.
The CG puppet, that
because that was the biggest complaint in episodes. Well, not the biggest, but that was a big complaint in episodes.
Number 1, Yoda.
That was a big complaint in episodes 1 through 3, is people were like, we don't want a CGI Yoda.
Puppet.
No.
Give me the puppet.
And maybe it's nostalgia from us, older generation. Maybe we're just like, no, please don't. But I don't know. But yeah.
The Last Jedi brought back that puppet. It was a puppet in Last Jedi, and people loved it.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, going back to like the virtual sets and things like that, I don't know. My like my Matrix slash cyberpunk slash like dystopian future brain is just, the cogs are going to where like if we don't continue to like go out there and like, you know, have practical sets and do these practical sets things, then people aren't going to be like that invested in like going to places and seeing these environments. And then you get into the whole environmental issue of like, well, when every like piece of greenery on the planet has been taken over by Costco or, you know, like corporations, and we have nothing but dirt in cities, that like it won't matter to people watching TV because they can just manufacture them on a green screen somewhere. Yeah. So it's one of those things where you're like,
well, Matrix 4 is being shot on location, so that, you know, if that helps.
And I think that's the thing. There's always going to be filmmakers, like, you know, there's the example to me is film versus digital. Like, there's still filmmakers who are like, I will never shoot digitally. I shoot on film. This, that, and the other. I think there's always going to be filmmakers who are going to be like, I need to be on a location. I cannot be in an air conditioned set where we just go turn off the AC. We're about to start shooting. I think there's directors who are going to be like, nope, I need to be, because they grew up as fans of the movies that did go to sets and locations and stuff like that.
As long as they're powerful enough that the studios will give them that boon.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure location directors would prefer to not have their jobs disappear too. So
yeah, exactly. There's also a lot of tourism, like, it affects
look at Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I mean, like, look what that did to Australia. It just blew up their tourism market. Yeah,
it affects, you know, countries as far as them, like, you know, getting some money because of, you know, the advertising and all of that stuff. But anyway, that's a conversation.
It's a fair point.
A whole other day.
That said, even people that do use sets, I would love to, and don't get me wrong, love me some Canada, but I would love to see people not just constantly use Vancouver for everything.
Yes.
Like, also all of the Sci-Fi Channel and most of the CW.
Well, there's so many shows. Like, you watch a movie like The Exorcist where they're like, this is Iraq, and you're like, yeah, they really went there. And it's like, we shot this in the East Coast. You're like, yeah, they really went there. Now it'd be like, where Canada? This is New York, and everything is Canada, and you're just like, okay.
Oh, look, I can see their breath because it's 40 degrees out when they're filming. Yeah. That's the big thing that always kills me. It's like, well, to be fair, Psych didn't film in Canada. They filmed in the Pacific Northwest, but they're like, it's Santa Barbara, and they're running around in t-shirts, and I can see their breath because Portland is not the same temperature as Santa Barbara.
That's why visually the first season of Supergirl stood out, because they filmed in LA.
And unfortunately we lost an amazing actor because she's like, I'm not moving
to Vancouver,
which was too bad because I loved her. She's Louise, I just blanked on her name.
Christina Flockhart.
Thank you. Her Cat Grant was fantastic, but I don't know.
Back to Loki.
Like I said, the conversation will meander because that's
exactly. We actually warned Cam before we clicked record that we will go off. We will have our own timeline break, and we will go off on so many weird tangents.
The multiverse of Marvel, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I do the same way because I'm the same. Like I have a shows, and I'll just be like, we're going when we're going.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, we only have 2 episodes to talk about, so it's like
true. Yeah, very true.
But a lot happened in them, didn't they? Like there's so much to speculate about. Like, even down to like, is it Loki? Is it Enchantress? Like, now that is mind blowing, because the motivations of, if it's a Loki, or if it's an Enchantress, their motivations as a character can be completely different. Like,
the difference is taking over the Time Bureau, or not the Time Bureau, there's too many things. There's too many sci-fi shows that use time things that it's like, I'm like, it's not the Time Lords, it's not the Time Bureau, the TVA. Loki wants to take over the TVA. Lady Loki wants to blow the whole thing up. So at least is what it seems like right now.
Right. Like, she's actually doing the anarchy thing, which is like destroying the system. Like, she's actually breaking the system that has been put in place. So like all the rules that we learned about in the first episode, and then going into like the, you know, up to the end of the second episode, like all the rules that we learned about, we're like, okay, now we know how this world is supposed to work, but now it's completely broken, and we're going to have to figure out what this new, like, crazy fractured universe, multiverse is going to be.
And how do we
So
fix it?
that's
Or,
really
well,
exciting.
maybe we can't fix it because, you know, they did say in the episode,
Right.
there's some nexus events that happen that just can't be fixed. And it's like,
right.
okay.
And I doubt that they are going to fix it because, again, like we had, I mean, Into the Spider-Verse isn't Marvel, but like, oh, you know, what's happening with the other Spider-Man movies and the things that are coming out, like, it's definitely going to behoove them to have more choice than less choice in the future, especially after we ended, you know, the Infinity War.
Yeah.
Like, I think the writers and creators are better off being spoiled for choice than rather having to continue down a narrow path, which seems like, you know, like you have Captain Marvel to kind of take over and all you know, like to be the replacements of, you know, we need a replacement Tony, we need a replacement, you know, Cap, we already got that with, you know, Falcon, but, you know, we don't want more of the same crap.
Yeah. No. And we still have the Eternals of it all.
Yes. Which seems like it's going to be completely out of left field compared to everything that we've had so far.
It's going to be a very interesting movie year because this year we have Black Widow, and we know Julia Louis-Dreyfus was supposed to make her appearance in that first before
Winter Soldier.
Soldier. Florence Pugh is in Hawkeye. We know that she's in Hawkeye, so that's playing that way. We have Eternals, Shang-Chi, and then Spider-Man in December.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's also going to be like, man, where's all this going to lay out for?
Well, and obviously COVID messed up the release dates and a lot of timelines for all of that. Because, you know, Black Widow was supposed to come out a year ago. The Eternals was supposed to come out 6 months. It's like,
Black Widow, I think, is the poor, like, she always gets sidelined, like whether or not it's the studio or, you know, the greater forces of our universe working against her. But
well, like, at least I'm glad they at least committed to doing a theatrical release for it and not giving up and just releasing it on Disney Plus. I'm glad that they fought and just pushed it to give her a theatrical release.
I think it's going to do. I really think it's going to do well, considering like I did not. I would have been skeptical of a movie making over a certain amount on opening weekend until Quiet Place made 50 like 2 weeks ago. And so I'm like, okay, I think people are ready to get back to the movie theaters. So I think it's going to do really well.
That's also another thing to talk about is that before COVID, the theater industry was dying. It was dead in the water and everybody was going to streaming. Everybody was relying on being like, well, it'll come out to Netflix at some point or other. So like, why bother like shelling out, you know, $20+ at a theater plus popcorn and, you know, all the other things and parking and whatever. Like, going to the theater is already expensive, but if you're already paying for a streaming service and Disney Plus dropping all of their stuff on there eventually behind a paywall, of course, but depending on how many people you're watching the movie with, $30 to watch Cruella with a family of 5 is completely different than driving to a theater with a family of 5 and paying, you know, upwards of $15 to $20 per ticket.
Right.
So I think that people want to get outside.
Yeah, I think people are hankering for the theaters. Yeah.
They want to go and do something. So in the movie theater, that's something, you know, that they can do in relative safety. You know, you can socially distance at the theater, even if you're vaccinated, if you're still kind of feeling like a little, you know.
But we're also seeing a change in the theaters and that the streaming services, I mean, Amazon's looking to buy, Cinemark, I don't know. Amazon and Netflix are both looking to buy theater chains because I think they're looking at a new model, which I think maybe, you know, Disney Plus, you know, Disney is also looking at. Obviously, they don't own any theaters, but they, you know, a couple months ago, they got rid of the bill that doesn't allow studios to own theaters. So I think if streaming actually ends up purchasing movie theaters, we're going to see this hybrid model where, hey, if you have a subscription to Netflix, to Amazon, you get a discount if you go to the theater, but you know, so then they're still boosting those numbers.
Well, it's that, and then you also have the fact that and you have the thing where, you know, all the Pacific theaters closing. So it's like, that's also, you also then have the possibility of AMC, because AMC just bought a number of Pacific locations. Hasn't been confirmed that they bought the dome and some of the Arcalights, but it looks like
it was on their website, and then it was off 30 minutes later. Yeah.
And so that's its own thing too, of like a single theater brand owning all the theaters. There's also something where it's like as much as I love the movie theater, I'm very happy that we in LA at least also have the Alamo, and we also have Lemley, which is the indie theater and stuff like that. So those do exist, but it is that the theater thing is going to be very interesting in that, like, where do things go? How long do they last? It seems like every studio made some kind of deal, because it was Trolls 2 that got everyone pissed off.
Where they're like, oh, we're never going to have any of your feature films in our theaters again. Well,
and then the deal got changed. Yeah, and then the deal got changed.
I think it's 30 days. Yeah, like it's in theater.
45. It's 45.
Is it 45 now? And then it can go to stream. Yeah.
Because it used to be 90, so then it got cut in half to 45. And so, 45 days after release, it can then go. And HBO Max did their whole thing, but it pissed off so many people and seemed to cause so many legal headaches that then they were like, that's just for this year. We're sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
Please don't be mad at us, Denis Villeneuve. We're so sorry.
Right.
I'm just curious to see, like, I know for a fact that if you're going to have like a headlining Marvel film in a movie theater, it's going to do, it's going to go bananas. It's going to do fine. It's going to do great. But I'm interested to see if those are the only types of movies that are going to be in theaters from now on. Like, I mean, the Alamo and like the Lamele, which you were talking about, Cam, well, they cater to a very specific crowd.
Well,
like indie film goers are a very specific crowd. So those movies aren't going to be like your Quiet Place,
well, they're saying that's where they're seeing the biggest hit is your indie films and your, I hate saying lower budget films, but it's like you rely on people seeing, the marketing for it, seeing them at the theaters, just dropping them on streaming, because there's so much on the streaming platforms, they just get lost in the mix. And so nobody even knows about them.
I could see indie films still being viable as a niche experience for the people that like to see indie films. And I can see blockbuster films being, still viable in a movie theater, but everything in between is what I'm actually focusing on here. It's like, are they going to continue to be in the theaters, or is it going to be potentially like all on dropped on streaming now behind, like the Disney Plus paywall, or, we're just gonna like pay the streaming channel is just going to pay us to have the film on their channel for, however many months.
I'm hoping things will still, like, to me, I remember the moment, granted I didn't like the movie either, so that didn't help, but I remember the moment when I was in like an AMC and it was like there was 5 different showings of the Joker. Like it took up 5 of the 16 screens, and then like one showing of Parasite at like 5 in the afternoon. And I was like, come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it always is, though. That's how it's always been. I remember back when The Dark Knight came out, and it was literally every screen in the theater. I crap you not, for an entire week, every screen in the theater was Batman The Dark Knight. And this was like, it's your average size theater. And then like maybe they'll have like one reserved in the back for, whatever, but it was insane. But of course The Dark Knight had I think that was like movie theaters operating at like its peak. I think that was its golden year. I think movie theaters will never perform like that ever again.
Probably not.
Because Batman, because did that have the longest theater run? Did it overtake Titanic?
I think that would. I think it would be in the modern era. Back in the 70s, movies used to play for like 2 years. Yeah, like things used to stay in theater forever. Star Wars, the original Star Wars, was in theaters forever, and so like maybe in the modern era. I don't think so though. I think Titanic. I think Titanic was still in theaters for like up to a year. There might have been a couple theaters here and there still showing Dark Knight, but generally it was already out on Blu-ray and everything by like the 6-7 months in.
That was bananas.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. Like movies that no longer do what Titanic did, which is that like people forget, like even may never distrust James Cameron. Avatar did the same thing, where it's like that movie didn't necessarily open number 1. It opened in the middle, and then it kind of maintained this until it kind of then went up. Like movies
buoyancy. Yeah.
don't do that now. It's like they open massively huge and then dip, and then they're out of the top 10.
Yeah.
Well, people forget about them and they move on to the next thing. Like I couldn't even tell you the last movie that I saw.
I mean, it's also the internet. It's like back in the day, it was word of mouth. So it's like, oh, it took a while for word of mouth to get around. So people went. Nowadays, it's literally everything is on the internet within minutes of the film releasing. So you're not, you're reading all the reviews right then. You're getting all of the critiques, everything right then, as opposed to that slow burn of people talking about it. And
Right.
I think the last movie to actually really do that. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that we live in this nightmare world where we have way too much content out there to consume that we would never be able to, like, if we spent an entire lifetime trying to like go through every library of like Netflix and Disney Plus and like everything. Like, no, not everybody's watching the same thing and not everybody's like getting on the same bandwagon. We're all operating at different wavelengths. Like, yes, there's enough people in the world to consume this content and have, your Stranger Things and all that make huge waves. But at the same time, you're not waiting on the next like Titanic. You're not waiting on the next Dark Knight like you were maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
Because now you can just move on to the next thing. Art is massively consumable, and like that is from an artist perspective, that is terrifying because like
find your niche. That's the only thing I can ever tell anybody. Find your niche. Like that's why I do horror.
Right. Find your niche, or continue to create content ad nauseum as fast as you possibly can, rather than working on a master stroke.
Yeah.
Oh man, the problem with the second one is like that was a lot of my 20s, and I was like, I got so burnt out, and like eventually the wheels feel, sometimes they come off the car. Sometimes it is okay to be like, you know what, let me work on 3 projects, and this is the one I'm really going to take my time on, as the other 2 are more my quicker, dirty, the guy gets this out of my system. That's the old like
dirty quick paycheck.
Dirty quick paycheck, or even something like in the 80s, like Spielberg and Scorsese and those guys used to always do these things where they'd be like, here's the movie I'm going to spend 3 or 4 years doing, or like the Coen brothers famously like took like years to write Miller's Crossing because it was really complicated and had all these moving parts and it was in the past and all these other things. And then they were like, let's just write something on the weekend. Let's just kind of and they wrote Barton Fink, you know what I mean? And so it's like Scorsese made After Hours because he was so like busy trying to get Last Temptation of Christ, and trying to get that made. And it was taking so long and all this stuff. He's like, I just got to make a simple movie really quick, just kind of get the exercise. And I'm like, that's the modus operandi I kind of like working in, is like, let me do the one thing that that's going to take weeks or years or this, that, and the other. And then sometimes just throw it on Twitter and like, who wants to just make a thing this weekend? Let's just do it. let's just get it good. Let's get something going. So it's fun.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we've exceeded our hour limit here, which it's because there's so much to talk about and we could just keep talking about. And I definitely know we're going to have you back on to talk more about stuff.
Yeah, please.
There's so much. I mean, let people know, where can they find you? Do you have anything you want to shout out?
The main thing on Twitter, pretty much everywhere is The Cameron Rice, CameronRice. Also on Twitch, where I usually I treat my Twitch kind of like a radio show where I'll just kind of come on and just talk about what's on my mind. I started playing Magic the Gathering, so I talked about that a little bit. What that's like, which is a learning curve. It's a learning curve. And then outside of that, Cam Rice Photo on Instagram. Go check that out.
Yay. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next. Oh, Genevieve, yes. How do they find us?
Let me do my bit.
Let's do your spiel.
So if you want to continue to watch our content, if you like what we do, please like this video, subscribe, ring that notification bell so you get notified every time we update. We post videos every Friday at noon Pacific Standard Time, and we are so happy that you are here watching us now. Thank you so much. And please, we are also in podcast form. So if you want to listen to the show while you're driving to work, during your commute, because I know we're all getting back to work and having, And
if you're in LA, you're spending hours in traffic again.
Yeah, like me.
In 100-degree weather.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are on any of your preferred podcast platforms. So go search us. We are also The Rollout. Also, please follow Culture Slate, who powers us.
Yay.
Very much appreciate it. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful day. We will see you soon.